Hello students, today in this lecture we will do the German school of diffusionism and understand how German philosophers thought diffusionism as a concept. In the earlier lecture we have already done the British thought about diffusionism, and hence we will now do about how the German philosophers thought about it. There are four philosophers related to the German school of diffusionism. The first one is Friedrich Ratzel or F. Ratzel. The second is Fritz Graebner or F. Graebner. Then comes Father Wilhelm Schmidt, and then Leo Frobenius. Let us first understand what German school of thought in diffusionism meant. German or Australian continental diffusionists are considered superior to British counterparts in their outlook, methodological approaches, and ideologies. Believing in theory of cultural diffusionism, German diffusionists also touched evolutionary schemes. Hence, unlike British counterparts, German diffusionists were not restricted only to diffusionism. They also touched the evolutionary aspect of culture. They were of the view that different cultural complex originated independently or freely at several parts of the earth, from where they imitated and migrated to other places. Hence, these cultural complexes, the German diffusionists thought that these cultural complexes had an independent origin at a particular place. They could have this origin could have some cultural traits which are imitated or migrated from other places. According to German diffusionist thought, inventions and discoveries were a continuous process. Discoveries can occur at several places by several generations. They accepted the theory of diffusion as well as evolution, both for cultural development and growth. So they were of the view that inventions and discoveries are a continuous process. So hence a society must they are into the process of inventions and have certain discoveries, and which can occur at several places and several generations. They accepted the theory of diffusion. Yes, they accepted that some cultural traits might have been imitated and might have been migrated, but they also accepted evolution, which is important for cultural development and growth. As they talk about spread of cultural trait from one circle to another and from one district to another, their school is known as Kulturkreis school or culture circle school or culture district school. So they what you will come to know about these culture circle or culture district or culture district school in the coming slides, and you will know how German thought of diffusionism is based on this culture circle. After having understood the general thought of German philosophers on diffusionism, let us now study the individual philosophers' thought on diffusionism as a concept. Friedrich Ratzel, he wrote many volumes of on anthropogeography. Anthropogeography was his book's name, and in this book he emphasized upon the relation between anthropology and geography. According to him, the most important consideration was to discover from where cultural traits came and where they went. He agreed to the view that due to environmental variation, there has to be cultural differences. He was of the opinion that due to a culture that is developing in a desert, a mountain region, or a place near the lake has to be different because of the different environmental adaptations the society or the people take to overcome the environmental variations. So hence there will be cultural differences. Ratzel believed in the principle of creation of form. According to it, he observed that borrowing must have taken place in some societies, which resulted in similarities in cultural traits. So this means that Ratzel found that if two societies had similar cultural traits, it is a possibility that borrowing must have taken place. Borrowing of one cultural trait to another must have taken place amongst these societies. Applying this principle to the African bow and arrow, he observed that cross section of the bow shaft and fastening of the bow string and the feathering of the arrow were quite like those in Indonesia. Hence, the African bow and arrow and the Indonesian bow and arrow seem to, according to him, seem to be alike, had similar features. Leo Frobenius. He observed that historical connections usually implied much more than transmission of single cultural trait because often whole cultural complexes are involved. So, historical connections usually implied much more than transmission of single cultural trait. There has to be some historical connection between two societies to have cultural complexes, that cultural traits that are similar. He concluded that migration was an important factor of explanation than diffusion in explanation of cultural similarities. Matlab, he wanted to emphasize upon migration as an important factor, that in the earlier philosopher Ratzel emphasized on borrowing as an important factor of similarity between between cultural traits of two societies. On the other hand, Leo Frobenius, what he is doing, he is emphasizing on migration as an important factor of similarity of two cultural traits between two societies. He developed the geographical criteria, which meant that the number of similarities must be counted. Matlab, to conclude that one culture is similar to the other, he set two criteria: the geographical criteria and the biological criteria. In the geographical criteria, he meant that the number of similarities must be counted, and in the biological criteria, he meant that internal changes in a cultural society must also be taken into account while calculating the cultural similarities of one society to the other. He also took into consideration the study of mythology while understanding the cultural complex and the change and the development of culture. Fritz Graebner. He emerged as the main leader of the Kulturkreis school. He applied the culture circle and strata idea on a world basis. So, in the initial slide, we had seen that the general German thought of diffusionism focused on a culture circle. So, this person, Graebner, is said to be the main leader of this Kulturkreis school, and he applied culture circles and strata idea on the world basis, which means he analyzed the entire world as a culture aspects of the world in using this cultural circle idea. He spelled out the methodological principle of this culture circle movement in his famous book Method of Ethnology, published in 1911. So, students, you must take note here. First important thing here we have seen in these 2 points is German school of thought of German school of thought and diffusionism is about culture circle and culture complex, but the main leader is supposed to be Friedrich Graebner. So, in case you get a multiple choice question in which all the German school of philosophers of this German school are given, and ask who propounded the main idea, then you can then the correct answer for that question would be Graebner. He spelled out methodological principle. Now, this methodology of using culture circle as for understanding a culture, he wrote it down in a book, in his famous book Method of Ethnology. So, this Method of Ethnology is also an important book which you may get as a question as to who wrote it, what is it about, which year it was published, such question. So you must study it properly. He propounded two basic rules in connection to culture circle or culture district and culture strata. Criterion of form, as called by Graebner, and criteria of quality, uh, termed by Smith. It states that similarities between two culture elements which do not automatically arise out of nature, material purpose of traits or objects should be interpreted as resulting from diffusion, and regardless of the distance which separates the two instances. Criterion of quantity. It states that probability of historical relationship between two items increases as the number of additional items showing similarities increases. That is, several similarities prove more than a single one. So, to explain the first one, the criteria of quality, he said that similarities between two culture cannot which do not arise automatically of nature. मतलब, it is not important the two societies to be like together or to have a common this thing origin. Material purpose and object की similarities between small objects and certain things. Quality of culture. So if the quality of culture is similar, we say that these two societies have a similar culture. Now, in the quantity, when we see, so it is said that if two societies have greater number of similarities, so if a society A has 10 things similar to society B and 100 things similar to society C, then society A and C are more probable to have a better historical relationship than A and B. So you understood the criteria of quality and criteria of quantity. This he propounded as a two basic rule to culture circle. Now this is again an important multiple choice question. Graebner reconstructed 6 successive layers of cultural development, which are as follows. So these 6 cultures can be asked as to arrange them chronologically, or which culture according to Graebner is said to be the earliest culture and which is said to be the most recent culture, etc. Such questions can be asked, so you must memorize the chronology of these cultures. So the first the earliest culture is the Tasmanian culture, then comes the Australian boomerang culture, totemic hunter culture, then comes the two-class horticulture culturist culture, Milesian bow culture, Polynesian patrilineal culture. So Polynesian patrilineal culture is the most recent one according to Graebner. Father Wilhelm Schmidt. He declared himself as a follower of Graebner. They both applied the rule of criteria of form or quality and criteria of quantity to divide cultures of the world into different stratas and circles. By applying the superior culture historical method to known distribution of contemporary culture traits, they both claimed to be able to reconstruct a limited number of organized culture circles. So, by applying the superior culture historical method, they could easily segregate different culture circles. German school of diffusion is also known as Vienna School of Diffusion. Father Smith was selected as the president of Fourth International Congress of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences in 1952, held at University of Vienna. Hence, he popularized anthropology as a discipline and also popularized the Australian anthropologists who had made important contribution on anthropology in anthropological theories. Hence, it is also known as the Vienna School of Diffusion. Now, weaknesses of the German school. First, the theory could not prove itself. No culture circle could be established. No, objective culture circle. There was no, very prominent, outlines of culture circle. The shortcoming of the theory rested both in its premises and its method. Culture change may be divergent or convergent. The former means similar forms may become dissimilar, while latter means dissimilar forms may become similar in time. Diffusion, of course, plays havoc with the idea of culture circle. Now, this kind of change, divergent, and convergent. If you see diffusionism in the idea of a culture circle, this very the initial idea of culture change may be divergent and convergent, is falsified, and it plays in, it is a it is can be discarded. Hence, it could not match up with the divergent convergent theory. The approach or methodology was barren because it did not attempt to react about the dynamics of culture change. It was basically a descriptive ideographic method that at best gave insight about spread of culture items and overlooked analysis of reasons behind their acceptance, rejection, and modification. So their approach and methodology was barren in the sense that they did not attempt to reach about the dynamics of culture change. Why did a culture accept a certain culture trait, reject a culture trait, or modify and accept a culture trait? The German diffusionists were unable to explain. After having studied the German school of diffusionism, let us do some multiple choice questions based on this topic. Question 1. The idea of culture circle belonged to which diffusionist school of thought? Option A, British. Option B, German. Option C, American. And option D, none of these. The correct answer for this question is option B, German. Question 2. Which of the following ideas does not belong to the German diffusionist school? Option A, culture circle. Option B, culture district. Option C, Kulturkreis. Option D, none of the above. The correct answer for this question is option D, none of the above. Question 3. Which of the following philosophers considered mythology while studying cultural complex? Option A, F. Ratzel. Option B, F. Graebner. Option C, F. W. Smith. And option D, Leo Frobenius. The correct answer for this question is Leo Frobenius. He considered mythology while studying cultural complexes and culture circles. And 4. According to Friedrich Ratzel, which of the following was important cause for societies having similar traits? Option A, borrowing. Option B, migration. Option C, imitation. And option D, adaptation. The correct answer for this question is option A, borrowing. According to Graebner, which of the following is the earliest culture? Option A, Tasmanian culture. Option B, Melanesian culture. Option C, Polynesian culture. And option D, totem hunter culture. The correct answer for this question is option A, Tasmanian culture. In this lecture, we studied about the German school of diffusionism. In this, we also studied about how different German philosophers view diffusionism as a concept. We studied the views of Friedrich Ratzel, Leo Frobenius, Fritz Graebner, Father Wilhelm Schmidt. We also studied some of the weaknesses of German school of diffusionism. In the later lectures, we'll study the American school of diffusionism and other anthropological theories. Thank you.